So good morning and welcome to the Contaminated Site Remediation and Redevelopment Hot Topic Training. Next slide, please. My name is Alexandra Matos and I will be a co-moderator with Kyle Kubler today. We are both members of the CSRR Training Committee. Next slide, please. The Site Remediation Professional Licensing Board has approved 1.5 technical and 0.5 regulatory continuing education credits. Please note that to qualify for the credits, you must be logged in for the entire session and answer all poll questions that will arise during the training. Next slide, please. The process to receive the CECs for the course are as followed. The New Jersey DEP compiles a list of webinar participants eligible for the credits and provides it to the LSRPA. The LSRPA will email all the eligible participants a link to an LSRPA web page with certificate access instructions. And then finally, certificates are issued by the LSRPA after paying a $25 processing fee. Next slide, please. Throughout the training, you will see poll questions. You do need to answer the multiple choice questions. However, answering incorrectly will not impact your credit qualifications. I will now show you an example of our poll question slide. Next slide, please. You will see a pop-up appear on your screen with an answer and possible question. You will have 1 minute to select an answer. Next slide, please. We do have a chat feature for questions. We ask that you type in any questions that you have for the presenter at any time during the presentation. Please note that if a question isn't addressed during our question segment of the presentation, you will receive an answer to your question in the upcoming weeks. Questions should be brief and general. No case-specific questions are to be asked. Next slide, please. We do ask that at the end of the training course, you fill out our survey. The link is provided on this slide and will be also posted in the chat. You will also see that the slides are available now in the handout section. Next slide, please. Your job in this training is to participate. Please ask any questions for the presenters in the chat throughout the training. You do not need to wait till the end to ask. As I said before, you must complete the poll questions in order to qualify for the CECs, and we encourage everybody to fill out our survey at the end of the training. Your feedback is important to us and helps us come up with new training topics. Next slide, please. Thank you. First up, we have Rebecca Hollander with the LSRPA to speak. Rebecca?
Thanks, Alexandra. Good morning, everybody. Hi, I'm Rebecca Hollander. I am the Vice President of Internal Affairs for the LSRPA. First of all, I just want to thank the DEP for continuing to provide excellent training opportunities and allowing the LSRPA to support them in those efforts. This training today will get LSRP's 1.5 technical credits and 0.5 regulatory credits. Also can get credits for New Jersey professional engineers and New York State PEs and PGs. Next slide, please. So I'd like to thank our annual sponsors. We have our diamond partners and our platinum partners on this slide. Give everybody a chance to look at them. Next slide, please. Our gold sponsors. We have a number of gold sponsors. Next slide. And our silver sponsors. So thanks again to all of our annual sponsors. We really appreciate your support. Next slide, please. So there's some excellent upcoming LSRPA courses and events. We have the due diligence course coming up next week on June 11th. June 14th, we have the member series Winning Strategies for Growing Your Business. And then on June 18th, an Aspiring Professional series, Working Smarter to Characterize Fractured Bedrock. Those are all really great courses. Visit the lsrpa.org for details and registration. Next slide, please. We also have on June 25th, which should be a pretty interesting course, the Revitalizing New Jersey Brownfields Panel and Tour. A bunch of great instructors, so that should be a good one. That's an in-person course, so that should be a good one to attend also. Next slide. So this summer, we're doing something called a 90-minute summer skill series. they're short, bites at various topics. They're quick hour and a half seminars on some really interesting topics. We have a PFAS, remediation standards for groundwater, regulatory roundtable, eco-evaluations. The last one in August, the using artificial intelligence. That one looks pretty cool. So be sure to check those out on the LSRPA website. Next slide, please. Oh, cornhole, save the date. Annual cornhole event is on August 6th. The proceeds of that help support the LSRPA Foundation, which provides scholarships and grants. So this is an excellent opportunity to support and also come out and have a good time. So again, that's August 6th at Martelli's Tiki Bar. Next slide, please. Stay connected with lsrpa.org through LinkedIn, X, and on Facebook. We're all over. Be sure to see our posts and, follow and repost. Next slide, please. Okay. Oh, and if you're not a member of the LSRPA, please join. We have great content, advance your knowledge, get the most up-to-date regulatory and technical information. So again, join today, lsrpa.org, if you have any questions or you're interested in joining. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. I went through those pretty quick, but if you have any questions, be sure to check out our website. And thanks again to the DEP for hosting this. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Rebecca. Up next, we have Lynn Mitchell to discuss receptor evaluations, FAQs.
Good morning, everybody. I am Lynn Mitchell. I'm the Assistant Director of the Remediation Review Element, and I'm going to be discussing the receptor evaluation FAQs. Next slide, please. Before I go any further, I'd like to point out that our contact for receptor evaluations is Kendrick Brown. He was unable to be here today to provide this training, but if you have any questions in the future, he is the contact that you should ask your questions. Next slide, please. So the FAQs were released on May 30th. They were posted on the forms page. I believe there might be some problem with it. What you can see, yesterday there was an update. It should be fixed shortly. So anybody who wants to look at the FAQs, they should be back soon. The questions that I decided, I didn't pick all of the FAQs to discuss today. I've selected 8 of the questions, plus a bonus question, which Kendrick had said he has been asked frequently lately, so I thought we would add it to this training. Next slide, please. So the format that I'm going to be discussing today, I will have a slide with a number on it. That's the question in the order that I will be discussing it today. This is the exact wording of the question that was in the FAQs. I would like to point out in this answer that there is a citation here that I will be discussing, as well as the term trigger distances that I would like to elaborate on. Next slide, please. So this is the citation that's in the tech regs. This, if you would note here that there are distances in this citation, these are the trigger distances. And this is the exact wording from the citation from the tech regs. Next slide, please. So what the citation said was that within a 500-foot radius of each known point of groundwater contamination, when groundwater flow is known, you have the 500-foot radius. When you don't know, when it's not known rather, when you do know groundwater flow direction, you only have to go 200 feet up gradient. You still have to go 500 feet side gradient and 500 feet down gradient. You get a 200-foot savings if you know in the up gradient direction, if you know groundwater flow. But what is a known point of groundwater contamination? Next slide, please. So what we mean when we say a known point of groundwater contamination, that's the projected down gradient extent of the contamination. So if, for example, if you have a completed, if you during your SI, you confirm groundwater contamination at 100 parts per billion benzene in modern well 1. You know that if you go 5 feet down gradient from that, you are still going to have groundwater contamination. So it's not the well itself, it is the projected down gradient extent that we want you to use when complying with the regs. Next slide, please. This is the second question I'd like to discuss with you. When is a door-to-door survey required? Again, this is the answer that is in the FAQs. I'll give you a second to read that. Next slide, please. So the answer says if potable or irrigation wells are identified within a half mile of groundwater contamination, you have to do the door-to-door survey, as well as if properties within the trigger distance that are not serviced by municipal water and don't have a well record, because they have to be getting water from somewhere. So it may be a potable or irrigation, but it may be a potable well that they have on their site, and you should look into that. Next slide, please. What is expected in a door-to-door survey? Again, this is the answer that is in the FAQ. I'll give you a few seconds to read that. Next slide, please. So all properties within the trigger distance must be evaluated to determine if there are any unpermitted potable or irrigation wells. I'd like to be very clear here, not every door must be visited to complete the door-to-door survey. We do not expect that. There's not a need to. I'll explain more of that in a few slides, but we do expect that well survey questionnaire should be sent to all properties within the sampling trigger distance via certified mail and standard mail, and a follow-up inquiry should be made with any property owner who did not respond. Next slide, please.
Okay, everyone, this is our first test poll question. It is a true or false question. You have about a minute to respond. Every door must be visited to complete the door-to-door survey. True or false? Okay, it looks like the majority of everyone has responded. The answer is B, false. I'll now turn it back over to Lynn.
Thank you. I hope everybody got that right. Our next question is question 4. What lines of evidence can be used if a property owner doesn't respond to the door-to-door survey? Give you a second to read the answer. So please go to the next slide. So this is exactly from the FAQs. These answers are there for you to help you. We provided you some examples of the multiple lines of evidence that you may be used, so you don't have to knock on every door. You can contact the local water purveyor to see if they have any records of them receiving public water. You can contact the local and county health departments. You could also use the information that you have on the site, the plume dimensions, groundwater flow direction, the depth to contamination versus how the well was constructed. All of these things are information that you can use to provide us with multiple lines of evidence as to why you're not concerned with that home. Next slide, please. Question 5, how can an investigator locate private unpermitted wells? Next slide, please. Again, your local and county health departments are great resources. Please use them. They may be able to help. They may know information about the area. They may actually even know the property owners. So contact them. They should be able to help you. Next slide, please. When submitting an updated receptor evaluation with the RI, RA, or IE source control reports, does the ecological evaluation have to be resubmitted? Here's the answer from the FAQs. Next slide, please. So the answer is yes, it's important that the investigator reevaluate your ecological receptors throughout your investigation. And while you're doing that, you need to submit your updated receptor evaluation form so that your investigation should be recorded in your updated receptor evaluation. If you do have any questions, your EETG, your Ecological Evaluation Technical Guidance document, is available on our website. Next slide, please. So is a receptor evaluation required when historic fill material is the only area of concern at the site? This is the answer that is, again, in your FAQs. The first and third bullet are basically pointing you to various guidance documents. The first one's for your historic fill material, and the last one is your ecological evaluation technical guidance. So look at those, and on the next slide, I will go over the middle bullet. Next slide, please. So when you have historic fill, it's important to note the well search must be completed only for the footprint of the site. Unless groundwater is sampled and it's clean, we're only looking at the site with historic fill. So if you find a potable well on the site, you must investigate it. But since we're only looking at the site, there is no need to do a door-to-door survey if historic fill is the only area of concern at your site. If you have other areas of concern, then you have to go back and do the door-to-door. But if it's only historic fill, you do not need to do the door-to-door survey. Next slide, please. How should the receptor evaluation form be filled out if the site is very complex or the form does not address the site-specific circumstances? I'll give you a second to read the answer. Next slide, please. So basically, you should include a short, concise narrative with the form that clearly explains the site-specific circumstances and describes how receptors are being protected. Just tell us what's going on, and we will understand. If you need any assistance, please go to our receptor evaluations contact, which is Kendrick Brown. Next slide, please. So this is your bonus question. This is not in the FAQs, but we wanted to give you this information. What should a warehouse be classified as on the land use section of the receptor evaluation form? Is it industrial, commercial, or residential? Next slide. And the answer is that the warehouse does not have a NAICS code associated with it. The building should be considered a commercial property for the receptor evaluation form. Next slide, please. And once again, I'd like to point out that Kendrick Brown is the contact for the receptor evaluation questions. Next slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lynn. Next slide, please. Next, we will have Muriel speaking to us regarding variances.
Good morning. I'm Muriel Kiernan from the Bureau of Inspection and Review, and I'm here to talk about how to document a variance from the technical requirements. Next slide, please. The variance process is outlined in the technical requirements for site remediation, also known as the tech rule, or the tech regs. And these are documented in section 1.7 of the tech regs. This is a screenshot of the most current version. Next slide, please. 1.7a of the tech regs discusses the allowable parameters for a variance, and there are 3 important parameters. In order to vary from a regulatory technical requirement, the person responsible for conducting the remediation, who I will refer to as the PRCR going forward, is required to 1, identify the citation for the technical requirement, 2, provide a description of how the variance deviates from the cited regulatory requirement. And next slide. And number 3, include supporting documentation demonstrating that the variance provides verifiable and reproducible results, achieves the objective of the cited technical requirement, and furthers the attainment of the specific remedial phase. Supporting documentation is the key phrase here, and it's the most important aspect of a variance. Next slide, please. The department has determined not to require advance notice on a separate form prior to varying from a technical requirement. Rather, in each key document online service, there's a section in the miscellaneous section is available to indicate your variance. Deviation from guidance is the same concept. We say vary from the rule, deviate from guidance, but it's the same concept. So if you are deviating from guidance, it does not require a variance, but it still needs to be justified. Next slide, please. Okay, here's an example of the remedial investigation report online service, and I'm just going to go through and show you how to indicate your variance. So as I said earlier, it's in the miscellaneous section of the online service, and there's a question there that says, has a variance from the regulations been implemented, with a drop-down menu next to it. So when you indicate yes, next slide please. This drop-down table will become available, and it has all of the sections of the tech regs, and you can indicate which one that you are varying from. On the left where it says page number and submission, that's where you should indicate the area of your report in which you discuss your variance. That's not the page number of where the citation is included in the tech rule. That's the page number of your report. Next slide, please. And to be even more specific about the citation, in addition to indicating which chapter, you can also indicate the section, subsection, paragraph, and subparagraph. If you need to indicate more than one variance, you can click the Add Row button and continue to add variances as needed. Next slide, please. 1.7b of the tech regs discusses the variance exceptions, and there are 8 in total. So number 1 is the PRCR shall not vary from a regulatory, site-specific, expedited, or mandatory timeframe. Number 2, a requirement to obtain or comply with a permit. So this would include something such as a discharge of groundwater permit or a remedial action permit. Number 3, a requirement to submit a document, and this includes the format in which it is required by the tech rule. Please keep that in mind because that is a very important component. Number 4, a requirement to comply with the remediation standard. Next slide, please. Number 5, a requirement to comply with a quality assurance laboratory requirement, so such as the requirement to utilize a New Jersey certified lab. Number 6, a requirement to obtain the department's prior written approval. So there's no prior written approval required for a variance, but there are other scenarios in the tech rule that require prior written approval, such as 5.2D2, which is regarding the use of alternative fill from an on-site source. Continuing on, number 7 is the requirements of 5.2B, and this is involving the alternative fill from an off-site source. And number 8 is the requirement to not import hazardous waste as fill material, and that's section 5.2F. So besides these 8 exceptions, everything else in the tech rule is fair game for a variance, as long as it can be adequately and appropriately justified and supported. Next slide, please. So here are some tips and helpful hints on how to successfully document a variance. You're going to want to include a section of the report titled Variance where all of the relevant information can be disclosed. Explicitly state the citation in your report and explain why the variance was needed and what prevented adherence to the requirements. Please keep in mind that cost is not a valid standalone reason. Next slide, please. Give full details on the variance, not just the regulatory requirements, but also how is this variance still protective of human health and the environment? Next slide, please. So obviously the complexity of the justification will be relative to the complexity of your site conditions. Multiple lines of evidence should be used when you need to demonstrate protectiveness through empirical data. For example, I did not take a sample at location A because of XYZ data, and no receptors will be impacted. Professional judgment should be used when there are variances that do not require data to support them. So for example, my map is not to scale, but I'm justifying it because of XYZ. It should be assumed that the variance is acceptable unless otherwise told by the department. Even if the department does not agree with the variance, we respect professional judgment and we would reach out and request more information or to discuss rationale, etc. Next slide, please. Here are some common deficiencies that we see in regards to variances in BIR. Varying from the tech regs without acknowledging it. It'll speed up review times if the variance is acknowledged upfront rather than BIR having to chase the information down. Another common deficiency is not providing reports in the format required by the tech rules. For example, not providing a sample location map with depths and concentrations on that map. That's a huge one that we see a lot, and if we could just get that from the beginning and not have to reach out, it would really save us a lot of time. Another is requesting a variance but providing no supporting documentation. This scenario would result in the issuance of a notice of incomplete, and the PRCR and LSRP would have 60 days to resolve that issue. Next slide, please. A little bit about BIR's process. All documents are inspected and variances are identified during the inspection process. And then variances are split up into two different categories. There's real-time reviews, which means that the review of that variance will take place during the review of that particular phase. So for instance, let's say you're submitting your RIR and you have a variance in there. If it's a variance that could change the trajectory of remediation, we will review that variance with the RIR. Any other type of variance would be deferred until the review of the response action outcome. So this is another reason why it's critical to acknowledge your variances in the miscellaneous section of the remedial phase online services so that we can identify them during the inspection process and prepare the reviews accordingly. Next slide, please. The following is a poor example of a variance that we recently witnessed in BIR. This involves section 1.15 of the tech regs, which go over the vapor intrusion requirements for the receptor evaluation. The person responsible for conducting the remediation shall conduct a receptor evaluation of the vapor intrusion pathway pursuant to this section when any of the following conditions exist. A volatile organic groundwater contaminant is identified at a concentration greater than the vapor intrusion groundwater screening level within 30 feet of a building, and it is petroleum hydrocarbon based. The 30-foot trigger distance applies from the edge of the groundwater plume and is based on linear interpolation of the groundwater data and not a monitoring well itself. Next slide, please. In this particular example, BTECs were found above the vapor intrusion groundwater screening level in 3 monitoring wells, triggering the on-site building for a vapor intrusion investigation. No soil gas or indoor air samples were taken. No variance was indicated. And the justification used were that no odors had been spilled by workers, and soil borings under the building were non-detect for VOCs. This justification did not represent verifiable and reproducible results, so this led to the issuance of a notice of incomplete, and eventually the remedial phase document was deemed rejected incomplete. The following is a good example of a variance that we recently saw. This is pertaining to section 1.14A to II, the groundwater requirements for receptor evaluation. Lynn touched upon this a little bit during her presentation. So the citation reads, sample each potable well identified by the well search that is located within 500 feet of any point of groundwater contamination if groundwater flow direction is not known, or if groundwater flow direction is known, limit sampling to wells 250 feet up gradient, 500 feet side gradient, and 500 feet down gradient from any point of groundwater contamination. Next slide, please. The subject site was a gas station, and the groundwater contaminants of concern were benzene, ethylbenzene, xylenes, and TBA. 49 potable wells were identified within 500 feet down gradient and side gradient, and 250 feet up gradient of the plume. 40 of these potable wells were sampled. 9 were not sampled due to access issues. Next slide, please. The multiple lines of evidence used as justification for the variance was that the plume was vertically delineated at 25 feet, and the average depth of potable wells based on the well search results was 94 feet. 7 of the 9 properties with potable wells that had not been tested had since been sold since that original round of potable well sampling, and they were subject to New Jersey Private Well Testing Act. So if those wells had any exceedances, they would have been reported to the health department as well as DEP. Next slide, please. The continuing multiple lines of evidence were so this left only 2 potable wells that had not been tested. And the contaminants of concern were non-detect in all potable wells sampled, including properties in between the subject gas station and the 2 homes that had not been sampled. The groundwater pathway will continue to be evaluated, and protectiveness of monitored natural attenuation will be assessed as part of the remedial action permit as well as the biennial certifications. Next slide, please. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Muriel. Next slide, please. Up next, we have Don Kramer to discuss the new GIS layers.
Hi, I'm Don Kramer. I'm a section chief in the Bureau of Information Systems. Next slide, please. The section that I deal with or oversee is the technical support and GIS section. We deal with electronic data deliverables and geographic information systems, or GIS. GIS is the web mapping application and our GIS layers. Next slide, please. First, I'm going to talk about a little bit about our EDD submittal process. This is a basic flow chart of our process. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but the one thing that is shown here is that you, as LSRPs, create EDDs. There are 2 methods to submit EDDs to the department. One is via email. The other is via online services. Do not duplicate submittals. Once they're submitted, please do not resubmit them via the online service. We receive them, check them, and then they either pass or fail our checker. We send out a confirmatory email describing whether they were approved or rejected. And then all emails and deliverables and online services are archived. So we take the 3 files and archive them without us modifying the files. We take the files and then we have to pre-process them. They do not fit into our enterprise database system, so we have to pre-process them, and then we load them into our Compass system, which is our enterprise Oracle database. So next slide, please. So just several points about submitting EDDs via the online service. This is the most difficult step that for the process. EDDs must be zipped. Only include the EDD files. Please do not include any other reports, information. Please just include the 3 EDD files and their companion test files or any other things that we may have generated during the EDSA 7 checker. And do not resubmit the EDDs, please. This is an example here of a structure that would be perfectly acceptable for us. This received this way, they are very easy to process. Next slide, please. So this Compass data, we call it HASite data. I'm sure a lot of people have heard that. So what is HASite data and how can you access it? Well, the first part of this HASite data set is the archived EDDs that were submitted to us. These are those, as I said, the originals as submitted 3 text files. The other type of HASite data we have is our Compass data, which is this enterprise database which stores all the data that can be approved in one location, and it only stores files that have been processed, so they need to be approved and they need to be able to be uploaded into our Compass database. So that is what we call HASite data. Next slide, please. So how can you get this information that has been submitted over the years? We have been collecting this since 1997. I think the date of the requirement is. There are 2 ways. You can email us at HASite email address. There's also a data miner report that you can run to get the existing EDD deliverables. Next slide, please. So email requests are more comprehensive. We can provide more information to you. There are 3 types of search requests that we can process. The first is a simple preferred ID. So give me all the EDDs for one preferred ID. The other is a radius search around a preferred ID or around an XY state plane coordinate. And the third is a coordinate box given in state plane coordinates. The outputs that we will provide to you are there's 2 types. You can select one or both. One is the archived EDD data set, that 3 text files that were submitted to us. The other is the Compass data, which is also called GIS ready. This is provided in an Excel file, which has 5 different tabs. The first tab is the preferred ID information. The next tab is of the EDDs or submittals that we receive. And then a tab for all the samples, tab for all the results, and a tab for only hits. So it's things that are above standard. All of these results are merged into one spreadsheet provided in those 5 tabs. This is a manual process. We are looking to automate it, but it is done manually at this time. So when you do request this, it may take a little bit of time to get the information back to you. Next slide, please. So the data miner report that has been developed in the last couple of years, it has been augmented in the last 2 months with the actual EDD can be downloaded now. So this is a little screenshot of the site remediation reports section of the data miner reports. Down near the bottom, under the special reports category, there's a group called electronic data submittals. Right now there's one report. It's electronic data submittals by preferred ID. You click on this, next slide please, and you enter the preferred ID that you want information on. Next slide please. Click submit, and you'll get a list of all the EDDs that have been submitted to us. When an EDD comes in, we assign it a catalog number, which is on the left-hand side here on this report. This report tells you whether the EDD was approved, rejected, gives additional information about the EDD. For instance, the DTST directory name that you provided, the dates of the sampling, and so forth. This report has been there several years. It was put there so that you could identify those catalog submittals that we have. This is a list of EDDs that have been submitted to us. Just recently, we added a link to the right side of this report, shown by this arrow. You click on this view results, and it will provide you information about the EDD or catalog number in question. Next slide, please. So you've clicked that view reports link. A second report comes up. It has information about the catalog EDD, basically repeats the same information from the previous report. And then next slide, please. You click on that electronic data results tab, and this gives you all the results for this EDD submittal. There is probably about 60 columns in this report, so you cannot see them all on this data miner screen. You can click the 1, 2, and 3 to see additional information, or you can click the Excel button, download it into Excel, and there you can evaluate the information a lot easier. This report was designed to be downloaded in an Excel format. Next slide, please. So that was the EDD portion of my unit. We're now moving into the GIS section, getting into what actually is the topic, what is new in GIS. So last summer, we updated the GIS webpage. We posted a listserv July 24, 2023 that explained what the web page modification were. And next slide, please. One of the main things that talked about was we modified the administrative requirements for GIS deliverables. The previous version 1, just had 2 pages of information about generically submitting CEAs and deed notices. We have expanded those directions to include all the GIS deliverables that are required by the regs, those being site boundary AOCs, classification exception areas, CKEs, deed notices, and linear constructions. Next slide, please. So we have updated some GIS layers, and we have modified several of them. The first one we modified was the SRP preferred ID. We've added some new columns. We added a new table that provides information about the AOCs that were in the SIDs that were provided to us. We have repackaged them and included them in this layer. Next layer is the UST facilities. Previously, it just gave information mostly about inspections. We have added additional information about the tanks that are at the facility. We've actually added another related table to this layer that has detailed information about each tank at the facility. We'll go into those a little bit later. The final updates is the historic fill layer has been renamed. The historic fill layer has always been an estimated fill boundary based on photo interpretation. It has not been, there has been no evaluation of contamination included in this layer. And as we know, historic fill is, by definition, contaminated fill. So the new name is historic filled does not imply contamination. Next slide, please. So there are some new GIS layers. The one is the brownfields inventory for New Jersey. This layer has about 800 to 1,000 inventory sites that the brownfields unit has evaluated and has documented these as brownfields. This layer is being updated in several different phases. So additional layer points will be provided when the brownfields unit identifies areas as brownfields. They are going from town to town. So you'll see certain areas have lots of dots, other areas don't have any. Doesn't mean it's not a brownfield, it just means they haven't gotten to those locations. The other thing we've added was an aid to allow in the determination of groundwater classification areas. We've added the aquatards, the class 1 waters, the fresh FW1 streams, and so forth. We've also provided a link to the USDA Web Soil Survey mapping application. Next slide, please. So one of the main ways that we provide this information to LSRPs, the public, regulated community, whomever is wanting information about site remediation sites, we have provided a web mapping application. It's called NJDEP Site Remediation Profile in AGO. It's also referred sometimes to as Site Remediation Profile for a simple name. This is a web mapping tool that's specifically designed for investigating contaminated sites. It is accessed from the web page, from the CSRR web page, the resources section, and the link is this as provided on the screen. We have provided training in October 2021 for this web mapping app. So going on the web page, going into our training section, you can see how to use this web mapping application. Next slide, please. Here is a screenshot of the web mapping app. As you can see in the center, I've circled the hot link to the groundwater classification aids. This basically just opens up a web page that gives information about the layers that we have added, how to use them, and how to come up with a groundwater classification. This information does not provide you with the authentic or the regulatory provided classification that is in the regulations in the figures. The figures are not very detailed, so that is why we have given you these aids here to assist in your determination. And then the soil survey link is circled to the right. Next slide, please. Just to quickly go over a little bit about the SRP preferred ID. This layer provides information about every remedial activity that the department has worked on. If you want information about known contaminated sites, you would use the known contaminated sites list. The known contaminated sites list are known contaminated sites that are active or pending and have documented contamination. This SRP layer, preferred ID layer, is information about all cases that we are working on. Case that I have highlighted here is a closed case. It is a closed UST case. If you look at the pop-up that is provided, it gives a little bit of information about the case, what type it is, where it's located. Also provided are links to data miner reports. You see I have provided an arrow here to show you where the site detail by PI report can be accessed. So you see a site, you want to see some more detail, you click on this, you'll get the data miner report that you can go into more detail. At the bottom, the arrow at the bottom has related tables. You click on here, this one will show all the activities in NGEMS and their statuses. Next slide, please. So here's the UST facilities layer. We've changed the symbology to reflect that they are tanks. Excuse me. Next slide, please. We also, this is the information in the schema for our layer. So all of this information that is on the screen is provided in the layer. Active tanks, active gasoline tanks, counts of tanks, whether tanks are in compliance, whether how many bare steel tanks are there, runs the gambit. We try to include everything that might be information that might be of assistance to some people. Next slide, please. So the web mapping application, most of those changes that you saw there came from suggestions from LSRPs emailing us. We are more than happy to update that web mapping application. We control it. So if you have any suggestions, new layers, revisions, please email us at srpgis@dep.nj.gov. Somewhere in the section include site remediation profile, revisions, and then put a detailed information at the bottom. Any other questions about GIS can be sent there. And if you have any questions about EDDs, please submit them to hasite@dep.nj.gov. That is, next slide, please. I think that is it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Don. Next, we will have William Karp to discuss MGW exposure pathway issues.
Good morning. Thanks in advance for your attention for my presentation today. I'll be discussing issues, common issues with soil remediation standards for migration groundwater exposure pathway, known forward as SRS MGW. Again, my name is William Karp. Call me Bill, but you're going to want to email me at william.karp. And I said I'm a co-lead for the SRS MGW. Next slide, please. So why I'm here today is to further talk about what the intent is behind this SRS MGW. As you can see from this slide, it's really, the focus is on the future groundwater exceedances, and additionally, a tech reg citation as it relates to known or suspected discharges and how that exposure pathway may be addressed, aside from just the soil remediation standards. Next slide, please. To really drive the point home here, we have basically a bunch of different things that kind of mean the same or are related. The SRS MGW, the migration of groundwater leachate standards, which are only used in SPLP and require milligrams per kilogram, ARS, which is the Alternative Remediation Center for Migration of Groundwater Exposure Pathway. And again, really driving the point home, does not address current groundwater conditions and is really supposed to be related to future. One thing that is good about the pathway, not everybody really understands, but it's that it is intended to address the protectiveness irrespective of where it is in relation to the water table. So no matter where it's at in the unsaturated zone, it assumes contact with the water table. So just something to sort of bear in mind as we move forward. Unfortunately, the department has seen people use the applicable SRS MGW, and when I say that, I mean it could be the ARS as well. So regardless of what the applicable SRS MGW, seeing that used as a reason to not sample groundwater, which is certainly not protective of public health and the environment, really would direct you to the department's groundwater technical guidance, site investigation, remedial investigation, and remedial action performance monitoring guidance. I'm going to go over a lot of the content as it relates to the installation of wells or sample groundwater to whatever end you'll be doing that, temp wells or whatnot, but basically getting an idea of how groundwater may have already been impacted. So what are the, next slide, please. So what are the inferences even when you do put in a well, right? The question becomes, first you can see from this bulleted point is just because the groundwater isn't currently impacted, it doesn't mean that it won't be impacted in the future. When we use that, when we say that, we use modeling for some of the mobile contaminants, which briefly touch upon later, and it's also an option, an ARS option that requires pre-approval of the sea soil modelings, both the regular and the combined model, the seasonal compartments modeling. Alternatively, or conversely, when you do have a well in, it could also mean that the concentrations are just simply low enough in the unsaturated zone that they will never impact groundwater. And that's something that, again, it's better to have that information than to simply, not have an idea. So more data is always better. Next slide, please. So for the considerations for when groundwater investigation is necessary, as you can see, this is a direct citation from the tech reg, section 3.5. I'm not going to read it for you exactly, but you can see there's a lot of potential in there. And what do we mean by that? When there's potentially contaminated areas of concern, how may they have potentially impacted groundwater? And of course, collecting a sufficient number, appropriate methods, both sampling and analytical wise, something you want to keep in mind. Next slide, please. So what are the considerations that are found within that guidance document? They're all related to fate and transport, as you can see from this slide. we'll just go through from the bullets, top to bottom. That first bullet there, I'm not going to read it to you verbatim, but basically what it's saying is, are the potential receptors impacted? So what's on or close to the site, potable wells, obviously for well sampling, drinking water, occupied structures for VI, surface water, obviously, for ecological evaluations and even, drinking water, whatnot. Excuse me. The concentration, essentially the second item there, free residual product is detected. So how much of there is it? I'll talk later, I'll touch upon contaminants that have levels above soil saturation limit and what that may mean and what you may be required to do in relation to having contaminants at levels that are that high. The next two bullet points have to do with the location. So is the discharge close to or beneath the water table? It gives a citation here for the GIPDs, but is the AOC classified as an underground injection control unit? Again, if that's the case, certainly going to sample groundwater. That the next bullet item, 2 feet within the water table or bedrock. Again, that's really for the contaminants. There's not too many contaminants that you can really kind of get away with or make that technical argument or rationale on to not sample groundwater, and I'll talk about that with the next bullet point. The mobility and the solubility. So what's that saying is when the discharge contaminants are mobile, you really should be putting in a well. And what we mean by that is if the solubility is greater than 100 milligrams per liter. And what we'll find out on the next slide, and just in general, do your own research. Most contaminants are considered mobile, especially a lot of the ones that precipitate the other problems or pathways we have to talk about. Like I said earlier in the slide, the potable wells, the VI, all that stuff that's going to move. The type of soil, the transport potential in that next bullet slide. Next bullet on the slide. So is it relatively permeable? Does it have little sorptive or capacity? Something you're going to keep in mind as an investigator when assessing the need to put in a groundwater monitoring well. And then lastly, time, right? Time is really rules all here in this regard. Has it had time to go through the unsaturated or vadose zone to the water table based on the estimated time of discharge? Everything else you want to kind of take into account. Next slide, please. So, should have mentioned 726D. I hope everyone's familiar with 726D. That's the remediation standards. This is a screenshot from Appendix 10. The title columns, I've sort of matched it up, just sort of some of the documents. Obviously, we're in the T range. It's an alphabetical. As you can see, I highlighted all the contaminants that are considered mobile. A lot of actors here. You got the BTEX compounds, toluene, TBA. Got some chlorinateds, PC, TC. You can see, a lot of stuff is well over 100. So, you see these contaminants, and whether you're 2 feet, 10 feet, 30 feet, in most instances, unless you have a really sound technical argument, you're going to want to put in a well. I said because of all the other things that get triggered accordingly. I said if you need to do PA and SI accordingly in accordance with Section 3.9 of the Tech Regs, then so be it. Next slide, please.
Hi. So we're going to open our second test poll question. I do want to remind everybody that you need to answer the poll questions in order to be eligible for the credits. Next slide, please. This is another true or false question, and you will have about a minute to answer. Contaminants with solubility greater than 100 milligrams per liter are considered immobile. True or false? The answer is true. Next slide, please. I'll pass it on back to Bill.
Thank you. So I was sort of alluding to before, we had the test question in the middle, poll question. Essentially, if you're not sampling groundwater, you're going to need a really sound technical justification or argument within the appropriate key document submittal. I would imagine in most instances that's going to be in the site investigatory phase or site investigation phase. So something to keep in mind, in the infancy of the remedial process, that you really should be probably sampling groundwater in most instances, so unless you have really good reason not to. Moving on, next slide, please. Let's touch upon some other sort of nuanced things. Aren't that big of a deal, but certainly help the department in relation to how we review some of the alternative remediation standards. So here's an example of the ARS form. Obviously, it's not limited to just migration of groundwater exposure pathway, but I will be sticking to just that in this discussion or presentation. So you can see here on the highlighted portion of this form is a narrative standards. Right now, underneath the narrative standards, there's two different options. Technically, the second one has like kind of a third. That's a subset. We won't get into that, but the mobile chemicals, the ISO and groundwater data evaluation. I'm not going to talk too much about what you need. There's certain conditions that apply. For instance, I'll talk about immobiles very briefly. You need 2 foot from the seasonal high water table, and you have it delineated to the applicable SRS or ARS MGW. So ISO and groundwater data evaluation, kind of the opposite. You need to be within that capillary fringe zone. You need to have groundwater data. You need to show it's a historic discharge. I'm not going to get too much further into that, but you should always be disseminating when you're using the narrative standards. Too often people kind of just say it within the online submittal, and then they don't really submit the appropriate forms and the spreadsheet. As it relates to the spreadsheet, the narrative standard, some people would argue that doesn't give a numerical standard, which certainly that's a sound technical argument. So in that applicable remediation, the applicable number, applicable ARS could be NA. The important detail is going to be on the range on the site, and again, the information within the narrative. So you're going to want to fill out the notification form and the corresponding spreadsheet, and note that those drop downs are applicable. So whenever you're using narrative standards, please always use the form and the spreadsheet, and obviously, most importantly, have the appropriate information contained within the applicable key document submission. Next slide. Something else. So here, this is taken from the Remediation Standards webpage. This is related to department calculators. This is for all the calculators. So all this says Remediation Standards, the alternative product limit calculator. I'll put on that hat for just a second. I'll say that we really need to have, that to capture the data output, right? Oftentimes people feel the need to submit the, XLS file or XLSX file. Please do not do that. We have the calculator. If we want to double check the calculator, we can certainly do that. As it relates to the APL, when people do the grain size analysis, when they submit the calculator, we can't get to that tab to determine if the correct grain size or effective diameter was put in. So for the most part, people have been submitting the screen caps, and that's fine. Hopefully it's in the report somewhere. Please, there's no need to submit the Excel file. We have it. So again, just submit the screen caps within the key document submission. Sometimes people put it right with the forms. That's great. Not necessarily a requirement. They're still going to want to find the narrative that goes with it. But you can put it in there twice. That's fine too. I'd rather have it in there twice and not know where to find it. Something to keep in mind. Next slide, please. Touch upon this briefly. Again, this is, kind of keeping my hat on as a co-lead for extractable petroleum hydrocarbons and soil technical guidance. What this speaks to, although it's more than just that, Section 5.1E of the TEC Reg speaks to the need for a person to treat or remove free product and residual product to the extent practicable, or contain when free product and residual product when the treatment or removal is not practicable, and of course MNA, or modern natural attenuation of free product, is prohibited. Something to keep in mind, non-aqueous phase liquid or residual product or even free product may occur when contaminant concentrations are above the soil saturation limit. So you're going to find those values within, I believe, the remediation centers in addition to the ARS MGW guidance document. So there are certain contaminants that may exhibit those types of physical characteristics at a particular level or concentration, and you're going to treat those just as you would petroleum hydrocarbons as free or even residual product. A lot of times may not be showing up in wells, maybe like a sheen, but maybe not at all. In those instances, that falls under the umbrella of residual product. There's not, so I'll just keep under the umbrella of the residual product that there isn't a groundwork component to it. Go to section 422 of the EPH and Soil Tech Guidance. While it doesn't specifically mention CSAT or levels of non-EPH residual product, the The concepts behind that remain the same. The department really strongly suggests that you do technical consultation before conceding that you cannot remove or treat free and residual products to the extent practicable, and that your only option moving forward would be contained with engineered controls. Really, you'll see that on the technical consultation webpage, and that is something that you certainly want to follow. Keep in mind that if you are changing the use of the site from as of May 7, 2010 to a residence, school, or childcare, you will need written approval from the department and RAW, and that's in accordance with 5.3D of the tech regs. So something to keep in mind, that when you are containing, again, I would suggest the same. You'd still want to do a technical consult in accordance with section 422 of the EPH and Soil Tech guidance. So keep the department abreast of what sort of limitations you may have at a site if you're really going to go that route where you need to contain. Next slide, please. Thank you for your time today. Much appreciated.
All right, thank you very much, Bill. Next slide, please. This will be our first question segment. As a quick reminder, please keep all questions brief and general and no case-specific questions. Okay, our first question is, how often is a door-to-door survey expected? Does one need to be completed with every document submittal?
An updated receptor evaluation is needed every time in the RI and the RA phase, as well as the IEC source control report. So when you're doing the updated receptor evaluation, if your area of contamination has, during your delineation, you have found that your contamination extended further, then you have to do the door-to-door survey in that area.
Okay, moving on to our second question. If groundwater flow direction is known, that 250 feet upgrading is okay, but can you explain how that ensures protection of human health with regards to contaminants of concern heavier than water in fractured bedrock? And I will repeat the question one more time.
Nope, I got it.
Okay.
So if you know that you have groundwater contamination as you've delineated it in your RI, as I just said, you have to keep your delineation in mind and the contaminants in mind and everything as you move forward. The purpose of this is to be protective. So if you have that scenario, then you have to, and you know that the groundwater may be flowing in a different direction because of the fractures in the bedrock, and that you have to take that into consideration when doing your receptor evaluation.
Moving on to our third question, is page number and submission for variances the PDF page number or the document page number?
That's the page number within your report. So if it's on page 45 in your report narrative, that's what you would put there.
Muriel, this is another question for you. Could you provide an example of an instance where a report didn't meet the format of the tech rules?
I gave the example of not providing a sample location map with depths and concentrations. That is required by the tech rule.
Can you give examples as to what types of variances would be deferred for review until the RAO is issued, and why?
Atwood, you want to take this one?
Absolutely, Muriel. Good morning, everyone. Typically, like Muriel said, for variances, we're looking at real-time anything that can impact the trajectory of the remediation. It's one of those things you kind of know it when you see it. And from our perspective, if you are varying from a requirement to, say, delineate side gradient in a particular area due to site limitations or safety concerns, but you have further wells further off side gradient and you're applying for that variance, it's something we're going to want to look at now because you're attempting to get delineation complete, and it could impact what remedial action decisions that you potentially could make. In terms of deferred things, if you take a look at the TAC regs, there's numerous requirements that are well within the TAC regs that really don't have any impact on the remediation decisions that are going to take place by the LSRP. Some common ones that we see, a detailed description of site restoration activities. If it's not available at the moment, if you are rushing to complete the remedial action issue, the response action outcome and future development hasn't been fully figured out. You've done things like put a fence around the property instead of finalize the cap. Of course, those things will be documented in your modified permit, but like we see that quite a bit. That's not something we're going to rush to take a look at. But the best way to say it is if it's something obscure in the tech regs that's a requirement that doesn't impact the remediation decisions that you're going to be making as the LSRP moving forward, those are the types of things that we're going to defer the review on. Anything that could impact your delineation being complete, your remedial action that's going to take place in the future, the standards in which you're going to use to clean up to, those are things that we're going to review real time. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, Atwood. One more question. To confirm, if you have a deviation from guidance, how should you be noting this via the portal submission?
Unfortunately, as far as I know, there's no specific section within the portal, but there should be a comment section. You can always put it there. And of course, make sure you have a section in your report dedicated to the deviation.
Okay, the second part of this question is, are you checking the variance box on the online submission for deviations? If so, can the department change the online drop-down online form text to provide clear variance and deviation options?
Right now, deviations are not an option, but it's something that we could certainly look into.
Okay, moving on to the next question. Can you submit EDDs via the CD to NJDEP?
No, we only accept them electronically via email or via the online service. So if things are too big to be submitted via the online service, you would break them up and submit them to us via email.
Okay, and when you say do not resubmit EDD, does that include when data are represented in subsequent submittals?
Yes, I think that we only want a sample to be submitted once. So if you have submitted it and then you reuse that information in a sample, or in a subsequent report, we do not want the EDD submitted again. It's already in-house and we have it in our database.
Okay, moving on to another question. As part of the upload of deliverables, like the RIR, the EDD upload can't be skipped. If the EDD was submitted by email, should just the confirmation email be submitted? If so, it seems only zip files. Oops, sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm sorry. I was going to jump. I think you can bypass it. I don't do it, so you guys are experiencing it more, but I think, and Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, you can bypass the required EDD submission. So by clicking bypass will allow you to not include an EDD. Correct, Scott?
That is correct, Don.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to another question. Does an EDD submitted through the online service get a confirmatory email? In my experience, I've only received one confirmation email.
So the email should be coming every time we run an EDD, we send an email back. So if you have submitted a zipped file that has multiple EDDs in it, you should receive multiple emails for one for each EDD that you submit in that zip file. If you don't, email us at HasSite, that's HasSite email, and we will look into it.
Okay, another EDD question. Is it possible to batch download all EDDs for a PI through data miner, or would each have to be downloaded individually?
So right now, unfortunately, they have to be downloaded individually. We are, right at this time, working on a report that will allow you to download all the EDDs. The problem that we have is that some of these PIs have millions of records, and it times out the data miner report. So we are working on ways to provide all the information and not time out reports. So we will be coming out with an EDD. Hopefully it'll be on that same data miner report, be just a different link, and it will allow you to download all the results for that PI, but that is still in the design phase.
Thank you very much. Don, one more question. Can you estimate the turnaround on an email request for HasSite data, or maybe an average turnaround?
So if they're really simple, like give me all the things for the preferred ID, we should be able to, and this is prior to this hot topics discussion, so we probably have more requests tomorrow than we did yesterday. But we have been averaging about a day. We have been getting to them fairly quickly. If it's a complex one, we had one that was very, very entailed. Took us a day, about a week and a half. But we will email you that we've received it and we are working on it. So it usually takes about us a day to respond and maybe a day to get you the information.
Thank you very much. Moving on to our next question. Does no M&A of free product refer to just NAPL, or does it include DNAPL?
All the NAPLs. Yeah. LNAPL, DNAPL, NAPL. You got it.
Can we use the LNAPL calculator to establish a site-specific free product limit?
That's a question I'll have to defer to my colleagues in the Bureau of Groundwater Pollution Abatement. So we can follow up. I'm going to say unlikely at best, but yeah, I can follow up with this groundwater pollution abatement. That's kind of more their under their purview.
Okay. One more question. Is delineation to the default migration to groundwater SES before calculating and applying an ARS?
It's a pretty generic statement. As it relates to narrative standards, yes. You will have to delineate to the default, unless you can use a number of ARS options. So if you have a robust enough data set in the site investigatory phase, and you have the area of concern has 3 samples or so, and they're collected at the most contaminated depth based on field screening and other characteristics, it may be appropriate to develop an ARS in the SI phase. And in that case, you could delineate to that without delineating to the default. Obviously, you're going to want to take, multiple line evidence conceptual site model approach to sort of that determination, but it is possible, plausible, and so as long as it's technically justified, may be appropriate.
Thank you very much. We have time for just one more question, and it's another EDD question. When should EDDs for a groundwater RAP sites be submitted? At the time of sampling, every 2 years with the report, or as a batch at closure?
So by rule, They are required to be submitted with the key document or the report. But I know as a lot of LSRPs like to get them off their plate as soon as they do the sampling. So they do the sampling, they submit it to us, they get a response back, and it's done. So it can be done at any three of one of those three times. They has to be done by the final one, but we appreciate them up front when they're submitted. That way we can get back to you quicker, and it's closer to when it actually was sampled. So when you get back to the lab, if there's any issues, or we get back to you, it can be easily resolved closer to the time of the sampling. When you wait a long period of time, it does become more difficult to resolve issues. The further away from the sampling event you submit it. But you can do it any three.
All right, thank you very much. That concludes our question segment. Next slide, please.
Next up, we have Nicole Laliviere talking to us about RAP approval letters.
Morning, everyone. My name is Nicole Laliviere. I'm the supervisor of the BCANE permitting unit. And like Alexander said, I am going to discuss BCANE administrative RAP approval letters. Next slide, please. So beginning in March 2024, the Bureau of Case Assignment and Initial Notice began issuing administrative RAP approval letters for select RAP modification and for transfer change of ownership applications. This letter is in place of a traditional remedial action permit. RAPs are no longer being issued for transfer change of ownership applications or modifications for a change in address only. All other mods are still being sent to the Bureau of Remedial Action Permitting and are still receiving permits. All administrative RAP applications received after July 1st, 2023 are receiving the administrative RAP approval letters. Anything submitted prior to March 2024 should have received the letter at this point, unless the application was administratively deficient and deficiencies remain unresolved. Next slide, please. All administrative RAP applications must be administratively complete in order to receive an administrative RAP approval letter. I'll touch base on some common administrative deficiencies a little bit later, but basically, the form must be completed correctly and signed by both the BRCR and the property owner, as well as the LSRP. A check for the correct fee amount must be submitted. All past due fees must be paid, and the RCR form must be submitted when FA is applicable. FA is now being reviewed by the fund management section, whereas in the past it was being handled by BRAP. So the FA must be approved by the fund management section prior to BCANE's issuance of the administrative RAP approval letter. If there are issues with FA, you will hear from the fund management section directly, and then they will communicate with BCANE to let us know when the letter can be issued. Another important point is that new RAP activities are not being created for these types of applications. Instead, the applications are being processed under the most recently approved RAP activity. So because BCANE is not creating new RAP activities for the administrative RAP applications, they should be tracked differently than other RAP applications. To view where they are in the administrative process, go to Data Miner and then choose Search by Site. Next slide, please. Choose Search by ID, set the program to all. Search by your PI number, choose Program Interest and Sites Only, and then click Submit. Next slide, please. Open the Case Tracking Tool report. Next slide, please. And then you will see the RAP modification application administrative change received task. So this one is for groundwater, but the soil task looks the same. The transfer change of ownership application received task will display here as well. Next slide, please. So you will receive an email similar to this one once BCANE has approved the mod or the transfer. Next slide, please. This is what the letter looks like if you haven't seen it yet. It's not a new permit. It's basically just an approval letter saying that the department acknowledges the changes made. Next slide, please. I do want to mention that a new version of the transfer or change of property ownership form is forthcoming. Until the new version of the form is released, I want to discuss the most common deficiency we see on a RAP transfer application, which is the incorrect party being listed in section I. So this section is to be completed by the person responsible for conducting the remediation that is listed on the current permit. So this should not be a new property owner information, regardless of whether or not there is an agreement between the new property owner to take over responsibility for the permit. This information should match exactly what is on the existing permit. If the PRCR's address is also changing, that will require a modification in addition to the transfer. This is far and away the most common deficiency we see on a RAP transfer. Like I said, we are changing the form to make it a little bit easier, but for now, I just wanted to point out that section I is meant for the original PRCR on the permit. Next slide, please. So if the PRCR or the former property owner had an exemption for posting FA, that exemption is no longer applicable now that the entity does not own the property. So basically, you have the exemption while you're at the site, but once you are no longer at the site, the exemption goes away. An example is the small business exemption. So if you're a small business, you own the property, the PRCRs with small business, they own the property, then they sell that property, there is no more small business exemption for this RAP. So FA must now be posted, and a remediation cost review form and original FA mechanism should be submitted. Either party may post FA, it can be the PRCR or the new property owner, it doesn't matter who, just somebody has to be posted. Next slide, please. I also wanted to briefly mention the process for the supplemental certification for initial soil RAP forms. The department is encouraging the use of these. So upon receipt of the form in BCANE, you will receive an email confirmation similar to the one shown here. This receipt task is not viewable in Data Miner, so this will be the mechanism by which receipt will be acknowledged by the department. These are still being reviewed for administrative completeness by BCANE, and then they are forwarded to BRAP for issuance of the permit. Next slide, please. So here are just frequent administrative issues we see in BCANE with regards to RAPs. These aren't related to just transfers or modifications, they're just generally for RAP submittals. A PDF copy of the DNOs as a standalone file needs to be submitted for every initial soil RAP. It can be emailed to SRP_submissions or sent on a CD or flash drive with the application. BCANE does cross-check the property owner listed in the RAP application with information listed in the current tax database. If the information is inconsistent, a notice of deficiency will be sent. Care of is not acceptable in the PRCR or property owner's name or address unless it's for a special circumstance, like a condo association. If you do need to use care of, please provide clarification supporting its use in section K. For all initial groundwater RAPs or groundwater modifications involving the CEA WRA fact sheet form must be submitted with a site location map, a CEA map, and a cross-section figure. Even if these were uploaded with the RAR or through the portal, please include them with the RAP submission. It just makes it easier when BCANE is processing the RAP application to have everything all in one place. Please also make sure that you are always submitting the most current version of the form. When submitting a modification or transfer change of ownership, please ensure that all RAP fees are paid up to date. A modification or transfer will not be issued by BCANE or BRAP for that matter until all fees have been paid. So obviously there are more things that BCANE looks for when processing a RAP, but I just wanted to touch base on some of the things we're seeing most commonly in BCANE. Next slide, please. Just to sum it up, BCANE is now issuing administrative RAP approval letters for change in address modifications and transfer change of property ownership applications. These types of applications will no longer be processed by BRAP, and they will not receive a new remedial action permit. The process is already in place. This is just an example of one of the administrative letters that has already been issued by BCANE. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Next slide, please. Next, we have Scott Tyrrell to talk about incident follow-up guides in NJDP online services.
Hello, my name is Scott Tyrrell. I'm a section chief with Bureau of Information Systems. Again, it's going to be incident follow-up status values, meaning and use by the CDN and SID in DEP online services. Next slide, please. Incidents are evaluated after they are called in, assigned to programs, and given an appropriate follow-up status. Both the confirmed discharge notification and case inventory document have restrictions placed on the incidents that can be used in each. The restrictions are based on the incident's follow-up status, which is set to indicate the disposition of an incident after it is called in. These restrictions were put in place because thousands of incomplete or incorrect incident communication center numbers have been uploaded in SIDs that required database cleanup. In addition, some incorrect numbers were put into RAOs. As a result of the upload restrictions, we receive a lot of questions about incidents in the CDN and the SID. Next slide, please. In order to run an online confirmed discharge notification, CDN, the incident's follow-up status must be pending LSRP. For incidents with occurrence dates after November 4th, 2009, in order to upload the incident's communication center number in a case inventory document or SID, the incident's follow-up status must be either LSRP central file, portal central file, or pending UHOT. I put the information at the beginning of the presentation because I want this to be the main takeaway. If the follow-up status is not one of these for the respective service, action will be needed before the incident can be used. I will go into more detail for each next. Next slide, please. The following screenshot is from the incident selection page of a test CDN. Next slide, please. When running a CDN, the incident's communication center number is entered and then search is clicked. Next slide, please. If the incident's follow-up status was pending LSRP, the incident information populates like you see, and the CDN can be completed and filed. If not, an error message will indicate what the follow-up status is, or if the number is not in the database, like it may be too old or mistyped, or if it is not a site remediation incident, or if it was not processed yet. Next slide, please. Again, for a confirmed discharge notification, the incident's follow-up status must be pending LSRP. BCANE evaluates the incident soon after it was called in. If the discharge qualifies for the LSRP program, the follow-up status will be set to pending LSRP. Once the follow-up status has been set to pending LSRP, the CDN can be filed. After the CDN is filed online, the follow-up status is set to portal central file. You can go into Data Miner and see the status has been updated after you file a CDN. Next slide, please. When filing a CDN, you may see incidents with follow-up statuses of exempt, CHA, ER referred, or ER closed. The CDN may not be required per the ARCS rules. If additional remediation is necessary, you'll need to contact BCANE at 609-292-2943 or the email srwm_ngems@dep.nj.gov and request the incident be made pending LSRP so a CDN can be filed. We are asked most often about incidents with these statuses when people are running CDNs. I will go into more detail about why these statuses are seen. Next slide, please. I included part of the rules in the presentation as a guide to incidents that get a follow-up status of exempt, CHA, ER referred, or ER closed, where CDNs do not normally need to be filed. For number 1, a petroleum spill of less than 100 gallons where cleanup is ongoing or completed when the call-in was made may be set to exempt. As well as number 2, a discharge from a passenger motor vehicle accident. And for 3, emergency response and incidents referred to the County Environmental Health Agency will be set to either ER referred, ER closed, or CHA. You will need to contact BCANE to change the status of these incidents if you want to file a CDN or upload the incident number in the SID. Next slide, please. This is a screenshot of a mock-up SID. Shows the incident communication center number managing case column on the right-hand side, upper cell. The incident communication center numbers may be entered in the incident communication numbers managing case column. The format of the incident communication center number is checked by the validate for upload button. Here, the validation is detected that the incident format is invalid. It's missing a digit in the seconds part of the number, so it is incomplete. Next slide, please. With the number fixed, the SID validation of the incident format passes. Upon upload of the SID, the incident itself is checked against our database as follows. Next slide, please. For incidents with occurrence dates after November 4th, 2009, as I mentioned earlier, the incident's follow-up status must be either LSRP Central File, Portal Central File, or pending UHOT in order to be uploaded in the SID. Incidents with pending UHOT may only be used in the SID when the UHOT NFA will not be sought. There's another contaminated AOC, and the UHOT incident will be issued an REO with the other contaminated AOCs, or an entire site REO will be issued. An incident with Portal Central File had an online CDN filed for it. An incident with LSRP Central File as the follow-up status had a paper CDN filed for it, or it was accepted into the LSRP program by BCANE, such as some emergency response incidents, for example. Next slide, please. So incidents with occurrence dates between March 2002 and November 4th, 2009, they are in our main database and must have an incident program of site remediation in order to be uploaded in the SID. Incidents with occurrence dates before March 2002, the SID upload process ensures the incident communication center number is in an acceptable format as outlined in the listserv with that link there. Next slide, please. Older incidents had a few formats. Original incident numbers issued before 1991 were in the format year, month, day, hour, minute. Original incident numbers issued from 1991 to 1997 did not include leading zeros for single-digit months and days. These zeros need to be added so the current system can recognize the incident number. For example, an incident number missing the zeros in the month and day have to be added. Incident numbers that have an enforcement region designations that either replace minutes or seconds or add a letter appended will still be accepted. Examples are noted there. If the LSRP has both the original incident number and the enforcement region modified value, the department prefers the original incident communication center number. We get a lot of issues about these older incidents being prevented from being uploaded, most often because the seconds are missing. In data miner and online services, sometimes the incident communication center number is included as a case number or other identifier, but because of database field space constraints, the seconds may have been trimmed off or the dashes removed. You will be prevented from uploading a partial number, so make sure what you have is complete and formatted correctly. Next slide, please. Data miner and OPRA can be used to find valid incident communication center numbers and incident numbers. All incident numbers with an occurrence date after March 2002 should be checked in data miner before including them in a SID. Open data miner at that link and click search by category. Choose the report category incidents and complaints and run the report. Next slide, please. So this is the report. This is the report query screen. So you would enter the communication center number in the report and click submit. Next slide, please. So this is what page 2 of the report normally looks like. Note the incident program and the incident follow-up status are on that report. So page 1 of the report is the initial call in to the communication center. Page 2 shown is the copy made by our program. Note the incident program of site remediation and the incident's follow-up status. Page 2 of the report may also be for a different program, and there may be additional programs for multiple programs, additional pages for multiple programs. For example, if a bear caused a drum storage spill, there might be a Fish and Wildlife program page as well as a site remediation page. Next slide, please. The remaining common follow-up statuses you may see are UHOT central file, which means an NFA has been issued for that incident number. The NFA is a final remediation document, so the incident does not normally belong in the Incident Communication Center numbers managed in case column of the SID. If UHOT AOC must be listed on the SID, the incident can be referred to in the activity column of the SID. Referred is normally a referral to the receptor survey team of a verified offsite source incident investigation. The referred verified offsite source incident number should only be described in the activity column of the SID and in the REO offsite source notice. Note that for verified offsite source incidents, the initial call-in incident number from when the contamination was first found on site should be in the incident communication number managed in case column of the SID, and in the communication center number item in the REO. See this lister for more detail of how to handle the referred incident number in the SID. Be aware that some incidents that have referred as the follow-up status may not have been referred to the receptor survey team, so contact BCANE if you are not sure. Next slide, please. If the incident search failed to find the incident, you can try this additional data miner report. Open up NJDB Data Miner at this link, click Search by Category, choose the report category Site Remediation, and click Submit. Choose alternate IDs for selected PI in the Sites and Cases category. Enter the PI number. Note that not all incidents shown are correct or complete, but the report is generally good. Next slide, please. This is a mock-up of the report. It shows the case information at the top, and there'll be a section for each case at that PI in this report, one after the other. In this example, note that there are 2 incident numbers that appear on that lower grid. One that is before March 2003, so it is not available in the incidents report we looked at previously. Note that if you see an incident number in this report and it does not display the incident address or incident description, the incident number may not be correct. Next slide, please. If nothing was found in Data Miner, OPRA may be able to find the incident number. Submit a request at this link with the location information. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Up next, we have Greg Newman to speak to us about compliance averaging issues.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Greg Newman. I'm with the Bureau of Environmental Evaluation and Risk Assessment, and I'm here to talk about the hot topic of delineation as it relates to the application of the attainment guidance document. Next slide. Okay, so delineation. One of the most frequent issues we see at the DEP when reviewing attainment submissions is insufficient documentation regarding full delineation. In order to utilize the compliance averaging methods contained within the guidance document, such as arithmetic mean, the 95% upper confidence level, as well as spatially weighted averaging, complete horizontal and vertical delineation using single point compliance must be completed. And the language I have here in quotes is present in each of the sections, namely A1, A2, and A3, that cover these methods. Next slide, please. So in addition to the fact that the guidance document speaks to full delineation, there are also some regulatory requirements that actually also support this. Delineation to the residential, non-residential, and migration to groundwater soil remediation standards is actually required pursuant to the tech regs at 4.2 A1, 2, and 3. Additionally, the department provided some additional clarification via the January 2020 policy statement titled The Interpretation of the Technical Requirements for Site Remediation to Complete the Remedial Investigation. And in this white call-out box here, I just wanted to read the following so we're all on the same page. It states that if the remedial investigation does not include actual clean zone sampling data to demonstrate contaminant delineation to the applicable remediation standards and screening criteria, such sampling data are required to demonstrate attainment of the applicable remediation standard at the conclusion of the remedial action and prior to the department issuing a remedial action permit or issuance of a response action outcome. So what does this mean? It means that compliance averaging is actually a remedial action, and complete delineation on a sample-by-sample basis is required to utilize it. Next slide, please. So this slide contains just a couple of bullet points that really showcase why the department considers delineation to be really important. Delineation is critical to ensuring that the concentrations being averaged accurately reflect what the receptor is being exposed to. So if the calculated exposure concentration is not accurate, then the level of risk to the receptor is also not accurate. Sample points that are not delineated represent an unknown, and you can't just assume that the contamination concentration actually decreases away from a sample point with an exceedance. As anybody knows that's worked in the environmental field for a while, environmental data does not always follow typical gradients. Preferential pathways may cause sample concentrations to actually increase in the direction opposite from the discharge location. So again, incomplete delineation may exclude data points from the calculation that should be contained therein, which would result in an inaccurate final calculated value. Unlike other remedies such as excavation, where post-remediation sampling can be used to address contamination that is not delineated or other data gaps, there is no follow-up sampling conducted when using compliance averaging. Next slide, please. So I have a very simplistic example here where we have an area of concern where cadmium is the actual contaminant. And as you can see, we have 3 samples here highlighted in red that exceed the ingestion dermal soil remediation standard of 71 parts per million. And we have some clean samples, namely S4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, that provide delineation to the north, the east, and the south. However, as you can see, delineation to the west remains incomplete. If one were to calculate a spatially weighted averaging using this data, you would see that the final calculated value of 67 parts per million, falls below the soil remediation standard of 71. Next slide, please. Taking that next data set, if one were to complete the delineation to the west by collecting sample S11, we find that this sample also remains at a concentration for cadmium above the standard with a detection of 350 parts per million. This sample then required additional delineation to the west with a collection of samples S9 and S10 that now complete the delineation. As you can see below the table, the final calculation now failed with a concentration of 81.4 parts per million, which exceeds the ingestion dermal standard for cadmium of 71 parts per million. So in this particular instance, some form of remediation would be required to address this contamination at this AOC. So I think these two examples clearly illustrate why full delineation needs to be completed in order to employ the averaging techniques contained within the guidance document. Next slide, please. In terms of the documentation, excuse me, in terms of delineation documentation, reports that address areas of concern with compliance averaging need to contain AOC-specific figures that clearly demonstrate complete horizontal and vertical delineation. Figures that demonstrate complete delineation should already exist, as AOC-specific maps and figures are required pursuant to the tech regs, specifically the general reporting requirements at 1.6b8. And I have a little screenshot here of that section of the tech rules. And as you can see, we have item number 8 here that says maps and figures with map scale and orientation, including, and if we drop down to parenthetical number 2, you'll see that these figures should include sample locations, sample depths, and contaminant concentrations plotted on the map. So again, a little call out here, please note that contaminant concentrations should be plotted on the map. It allows us to readily see that contamination has been fully delineated. Next slide, please. Okay, I'll turn this over in terms of the test poll number 3 question to our moderator.
Thank you. This is our third poll question. This is our final poll question. NJAC 726E 1.6B8 requires the submission of maps/figures that document full delineation to include A, sample locations, B, sample depth and contamination, C, all of the above. You'll have 1 minute to answer. It has been a minute. Next slide, please. Oh, the answer is C, all of the above. I will now turn it back over to Greg.
Okay, just circling back to delineation and proper documentation. So since the figures showing complete delineation already exist, since they're required by the tech rules, it would be most helpful to actually pull them into the report where compliance averaging is utilized. If that's too much of a big lift for you folks, then if these figures are present in another document, then that document should be referenced and their location along with section and page number provided. But again, the department really prefers that you include those figures in the report where compliance averaging is actually being displayed. In instances where delineation is not complete on a sample by sample point basis, and the investigator elects to implement a compliance averaging methodology, then a variant pursuant to 4.2 must be proposed along with all the technical information and technical justification as discussed previously by Muriel. Next slide, please. Just a quick note here, the figures that are generated as part of a spatially weighted averaging submission that use GIS, these typically display functional area boundaries and polygons. These figures are typically not suitable for documenting that delineation is complete, especially in the vertical direction. So again, please make sure that these submissions have figures that display full delineation. Next slide, please. So, just as a quick wrap up, the take-home message is that, full delineation, both the horizontal and vertical delineation, is needed on a sample by sample point basis in order to utilize the compliance averaging methods contained within the attainment guidance. Maps and figures that exhibit full delineation should accompany compliance averaging submissions, since they really should already be in hand and they are required pursuant to the general reporting requirements and the tech rules at 1.6. Documenting full delineation will increase the efficiency with department reviews, and it avoids the back and forth that follows when this documentation is missing. Next slide, please. One last comment issue I wanted to cover outside of delineation just deals with functional area sizes for an unrestricted use. So if you desire to have an unrestricted RAO at an area of concern, you have to use the functional area sizes associated with the residential exposure pathway. For contaminants with a soil remediation standard based on the ingestion dermal pathway, the proper functional area size is 1/4 acre. For contaminants with a soil remediation standard based on the inhalation pathway, the functional area size increases to 1/2 acre. Now, a non-residential size 2-acre functional area cannot be used to comply with a residential direct contact soil remediation standard. If you're using a 2-acre size functional area, that final calculated value can only be compared to a non-residential direct contact soil remediation standard. So the use of a 2-acre size functional area is only associated with the non-residential exposure pathway, and its use requires the establishment of an institutional control. Next slide. So that wraps up my presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Greg. Next slide, please. We will now begin our second question segment. Our first question is, should we submit the LSRP supplemental certification form if the RAP was previously submitted and is still under review?
So yes, you can do that. Those go right to BRAP, to their email address. But you can do that, yes.
Okay, second question, regarding RAP modifications, should all of those submitted prior to March 2024 have been issued already? Can you please confirm if this is just a letter approval?
Right, so just modifications that are for address change only.
If it's a technical modification, then it will be with BRAP, and they are going through those as they can.
Right.
Okay, next question. What should we do if a co-permittee passes away or can no longer be located?
In the soil RAP guidance and in the groundwater RAP guidance, we have a section on what to do in that situation, how to document that the person died. We don't ask for dead people's signature. We found that doesn't work very well. So we have examples and ways for you to document this, and it's in both of the guidance documents.
Okay, moving on, next question. This person would like to know, what exactly is the formal difference between the communication center number and the incident number?
That's for Scott.
The communication center number is actually a time and date stamp that is created when the incident is when the incident is called in. The database creates it. It's sometimes referred to as the incident number, unfortunately, or the case number. So it has different names. When you look at the report, there is actually something called an incident number, and it's just a number. It's just a straight numeric number. It's a sequential number, and that is actually the number given to each copy of the incident. So when you call in the comm center number, the comm center creates a record that gets a comm center number, and it gets the first incident number. Then when another program copies that incident number so they can refer to their staff, another record is created, so another incident number is created with the same comm center number. So the incident number itself is just a sequential record number. I hope that helps.
Scott, this is another question for you. Does the department consider incidents with follow-up statuses of exempt, CEHA, ER referred, or ER closed as open incidents at a property that needs to be addressed prior to issuance of an entire site unrestricted use REO? And I will repeat that one more time if need be.
That's really not a question I can answer. Unfortunately, that's a Bureau of Inspection and Review question. We can ask them to answer that either now
Okay.
or we can follow up with that.
We will get back to you with an answer on that one at a later date. Again, please remember that any questions that are not answered here will be followed up with via email. The next question, the CDN discharge date defaults to the date of the NJDEP case incident number. Is there a way to revise the actual discharge date in the CDN portal submittal?
I've never seen that done. People have requested it, but as far as I know, it's never been done.
Okay, moving on to our next question. Can you confirm if single point compliance is required when utilizing 7510X as an attainment method, and is 7510X considered a remedial action?
Yeah, so it is a remedial action. Single point compliance is not typically required when you're addressing a post-excavation sample, which that methodology is specific to. The one caveat with that would be is if that hot sample that you're trying to address with this method is present proximal to a property boundary where the potential exists for the contamination to extend off-site, then pursuant to the tech rules, in that particular instance, you should delineate that.
Okay, moving on to our next question. Just to confirm, delineation can be completed to an ARS, SPLP, depth of contamination, etc., prior to application of an attainment method. Is that correct?
Yes, if you've successfully developed an alternate remediation standard using one of the appropriate methods, then you could average to that new standard.
Okay, and then could rounding then also be applied after averaging?
Yes, and the attainment guidance speaks to how to properly apply averaging. So, like in the case of spatially weighted averaging, you wouldn't round the individual results that go into the final calculated average, but you can round the final calculated average itself.
Okay. Another question for compliance averaging. For compliance averaging to a non-residential SRS, should a 2-acre area be used if the area of impact is quite small and the clean zone is quite large?
Yeah, with a smaller site, a site that's smaller than 2 acres, you would just default to the size of the site relative to the boundaries of the area of concern. So it doesn't have to be 2 acres.
Okay, another question about compliance averaging. Can we compliance average during site investigation phase that has been vertically and horizontally delineated?
My answer would be yes, provided that you're meeting the requirements of delineation, although typically that does not occur at the SI stage. But as long as the contamination is fully delineated, then one can apply compliance averaging.
Okay, another question. Is a CDN case of off-site groundwater contamination required to be closed? If it is, will a preliminary assessment be required?
So, everything is circumstantial, right? If you're calling in contamination for the first time upon discovery, like you should per the Spill Act, you don't know that it's an offsite source. You may suspect it to be an offsite source, in which case you will have to conduct a preliminary assessment and do a background investigation in accordance with 3.9 in order to close that number and then follow the administrative process of identifying a new number as a verified unknown source, offsite source. If you're telling me that it's an incident that was called in by somebody else and the CEA extends onto your property, that's different. We don't intend every single site that has a CEA that's been taking responsibility by somebody else to have to conduct a PA SI. So it's all a little bit circumstantial. If you have a particular case that you would like to talk about, I am the point of contact for Offsite Source. You can absolutely reach out to me and I'll happily answer whatever site-specific question that you have. Okay.
Thank you, Howard. Next question, is full delineation required if proposing a background standard?
I guess that question's related to attainment. And I guess the idea is that if you've documented that you have a level on site that you feel is attributed to naturally occurring background and you've established a number that's higher than the standard that's related to background in an appropriate manner, then you would be conducting averaging to that number, and yes, you'd be required to complete delineation to that naturally established background concentration.
Okay, moving on, next question. Are the functional area sizes in the guidance considered maximums since most AOCs are considerably less acreage?
I wouldn't say they're considered maximums, but those areas are tied to the standards and represent exposure areas for both the residential and non-residential pathway as well as the migration to groundwater pathway. So again, if your area of concern is smaller than that, you could default to the quarter size acre, depending on the nature and extent of the contamination relative to that specific area of concern. However, I would note that there are some distinctions regarding the different methods in terms of delineation as it relates to the functional areas. So in the instance of 95% UCL averaging, your AOC is defined by clean zone sampling, whereas with spatially weighted averaging, you get to use the full size quarter acre, even if your AOC is smaller than that. And that's a distinction that we'll be addressing with a revision to this guidance document, which we expect to be finalized end of the summer, early fall.
It'd also probably be important to note that you can do up to 50% more. Right? Did you talk about that, Greg?
I mean, that's a nuance that we discussed in the guidance document,
right,
but
yeah.
that's really...
It was a weird question, but yeah, to that end, it isn't the maximum. Even the maximum is could be pushed a little further, but that's...
Yeah, you get a 50, yeah. There's that percentage allowance as it relates to, one functional area for a site where it might be just a little bit larger than the functional area size in terms of the site area.
Okay, thank you. We have time for one more question. Are we required to break up AOCs into sub-AOCs if a AOC is larger than quarter acre of itself and we want to remediate to residential SRS?
Yeah, if I understand your correct.
I will repeat the question one more time.
No, I got it. I think I
Okay.
understand the concept of the question. I think he's asking, you wouldn't break your AOC up into sub-AOCs, but you would address that AOC if you're trying to comply with a residential standard, which requires a quarter acre size functional area. You would establish 4 functional areas, for example, if your AOC was 1 acre in size. So you're not breaking up the AOC into sub-AOCs, but you're addressing your AOC with multiple functional areas.
Okay. Thank you. That concludes our second question segment. Next slide, please.
We just wanted to give you a couple reminders. Questions not answered today will be answered in the upcoming weeks. Please fill out our course evaluation on the link provided. Look out for an email from the LSRPA for the CEC certificate access. And as we said, slides and presentation will be posted on our CSRR training page. Thank you again for everyone who's attended, and have a great day.